Hello all, it is your friend Dr. Alsop again to talk about the basic structures of the brain. Now, I cannot emphasize enough how we are only going to discuss the very basics of the brain. Later in your educational career, you will go into some more finer details of the brain in your neurology sequence. But for the purposes of this course, we are going to highlight the surrounding neurovascular structures associated with the brain. And so we need to learn the basic structures of the brain to help make those other areas make sense. So let's get a look at the brain. We are going to start with the lateral view, as you can see here, and the largest component of the brain consists of the cerebrum. So basically all of this that I am outlining is the cerebrum. My lines are gorgeous, as you can see. Now, when you're looking at a lateral view, you can only see one of the two cerebral hemispheres. But even when only looking at the one cerebral hemisphere, you can see how it is still the dominant feature of the brain. The hemispheres will be further subdivided into cerebral lobes, which are used for descriptive purposes. And while named after bones, they do not correspond precisely with where the bones are located. So as long as you understand the general areas of the lobes, we will be happy. We're not so into the boundaries, just understanding the basics. So the frontal lobe will be the most anterior, with the parietal lobe being more intermediate, and the occipital lobe will be the most posterior. And the temporal lobes will be inferior. So this is the temporal here. It's going to be below this lateral sulcus right here. So frontal, parietal, occipital, and temporal lobes. And it's really this lateral view that can show you all four of the lobes. You can also see nicely here the cerebellum. The cerebellum here, which also has two hemispheres that, like we saw with the cerebrum. The cerebellum will always be inferior to the cerebrum and posterior to the brainstem. You can see a little bit of the brainstem right here. So this will be helpful in terms of getting yourself organized in terms of anatomical relationships. Now, looking to a superior view, all you can see is the cerebrum. So all cerebrum all the time from a superior view. You can actually see the two hemispheres here. So here is one hemisphere, here is the other, and it's going to be separated by this dominant fissure or the longitudinal fissure. The falx cerebri will sit in the longitudinal fissure during life. Now this is going to be anterior, this will be posterior. So the frontal lobe is going to be in this region. It actually extends away further back here-ish. So this means that the parietal lobes will be here and the occipital lobe will be way back here. Alright, so that's all you can really see from the superior view. Alright, moving on to an anterior view. Again, the dominant structure is the cerebrum with that longitudinal fissure here. You can see the frontal lobes really well from an anterior view with the temporal lobes here and here. Here's your other frontal lobe. Now what is cool is we can start seeing some of the structures of the brainstem, specifically the pons here. And you can see the basilar artery running right down the middle. And you can even see a little bit of the medulla oblongata here, even though the vertebral artery, this particular vertebral artery, is really blocking much of the view. The other vertebral artery is not quite as large in diameter in this particular donor. Now on to an inferior view. This will be anterior and this will be posterior. And I knew that this was posterior because I can see the cerebellum back here. So that's one of the ways that I get directed in terms of the view here. Of the cerebrum, you get a nice view of the frontal lobes here with the longitudinal fissure here, and it's kind of been separated a little bit due to the brain being moved to see certain neurovascular structures. Also, you can see the temporal lobes that are really being moved, or moved out of the way, or reflected out of the way in order to see the middle cerebral arteries here. So these are the temporal lobes. You can also see portions of the brainstem. You can see a little bit of the midbrain, but not enough to really focus on it here. But you can see a beautiful view of the pons with the basilar artery right here, and the medulla oblongata here with the vertebral arteries associated with that. The cerebellum is located here, inferior to the cerebrum and posterior to the brainstem, and you can finally see those two cerebellar hemispheres located here. And if I mix up the terms cerebrum and cerebellum, I'm sorry, they always get kind of jumbled up in my head. So cerebrum is in this area, and cerebellum is going to be located back here. Lastly, let's look at a hemisected brain, which means literally the brain was cut right down the middle into right and left halves, and now we are kind of looking at an internal view of the brain. So here is the cerebrum, right here, and the cerebellum is going to be in this area. We're only seeing one of the hemispheres for each one, so one cerebral hemisphere and one cerebellar hemisphere. This portion right here is referred to as the diencephalon. You do not need to identify this, but since it is here, I wanted to point it out. This is often referred to as the core of the brain, which is not visible from an external view, so composed of portions of the thalamus, specifically the dorsal thalamus and the hypothalamus. So again, you don't have to identify this, but it is fairly obvious in this particular view. Now we really get to see the portions of the brainstem well. Here is going to be the midbrain, which will be the most proximal or rostral. Here is the pons, and this will be the medulla oblongata. And the medulla oblongata is going to be the most distally oriented or caudally oriented, and if we move more distally, so if we kept going this way, then we would be getting into the spinal cord. So remember that transition from medulla oblongata and spinal cord occurs right around the foramen magnum. Alright, so that is what we want you to identify on the brain for now. Knowing these basics will really help with the vasculature and the cranial nerves that we are spending the majority of our time on in this session. As always, feel free to reach out with any questions. Thank you for your time.